Hail and well met, fellow travelers. It is me, Bones, and I am here to talk to you about writing stuff. You know, today is Monday Fun Day, so I get to talk about whatever I want, which usually involves me talking about my webtoon thingy that is in pre-production, not what is being drawn right now. Right now, what is being drawn is a different webtoon that is in production. It was originally a novel, and it is currently available. It just came out, basically, and it would be lovely if you checked it out. Links below to our online stores. Regardless, not what I am talking about today. What I am talking about today has been dubbed Crow Story. It is so early in pre-production that I am just working on the world building for it. So I figure that it's fun to talk to you all about world building, because unlike topic videos, which are things that I want to do, it is far easier for me to come out with videos chit-chatting away about my own things because I'm so passionate about it, you know? That being said, YouTube is fickle, and I understand why tons of people don't watch these videos, but it still gets to my heart. No, it gets to my mind. It gets under my skin. That's not your problem. It's just me saying, if you like it, please like it. If you have any comments, please comment. And if you don't, just leave a heart, because that signals to me that people enjoy this and I am not just talking into the void, which is fine. I'm rambling about my insecurities. I'll stop doing that. Not your problem. Let's talk about writing, right? And today we're going to be talking about a province, and we're going to talk a little bit about one of the major religions practiced within that province, and it's going to be a great time, right? It's also going to be kind of a confusing time, honestly, because as we get into this, we're going to come up against this thing. This thing is nuance. I've really wanted to make a very nuanced sort of world. My main goal, my main philosophy in creating the current world that I'm talking about is that I wanted there to be a lot more overlap and a lot less rigidness. It's not really like this country has this type of fantasy race, and this fantasy race practices this religion, and they speak this language. And instead, I want there to be tons of overlap and in between. And it gets a bit confusing because of this, because it is messy in that way. It is not so cut and dry. But going forward, that is going to become kind of an issue. But hopefully together we can wade through all of this nuance and stuff. Yeah. Okay, so primer for those of you who have missed the other videos. Crow Story revolves around this world that is full of elves and kind of like animal furry people, or like fawns, you know? The way that it works is that there are 12 stewards and 12 elements that all came together to make the world. And each of the 12 elements influences like a specific type of magic, and it relates to a specific animal. And people will exist on a continuum between an elemental mage and that element's animal. That's how that works. I hope you understand that. That's kind of the basis for a lot of things. So that is the most concrete of stuff that exists in this world. Magic is influenced environmentally through development into early childhood, and it is not like inherited directly, I guess. It's not indirectly an inheritance blood magic system. The only thing that's, I guess, blood based or whatever is what element you're influenced by, because you're going to be one of your parents' element. Other than that, everything is kind of up to interpretation or whatever. And like, I guess with like the nuance thing, like the other problem is that there are a lot of terms that are kind of used to denote different things that exist on a spectrum. Like it's coming up with language to separate different types of magic and different levels of being a mage, but no cut and dry example actually exists. And they're gonna be people that exist like somewhere in the middle. that's just kind of life, and that's kind of what I'm going for here. So again, more confusion. So this world full of elves, there is a big western continent, and that's all that we're going to focus on for a good long time. So on this western continent, there is a super big empire called the Divine Empire, and they believe in this worm, this lindworm, that supposedly created the world by consuming all 12 of the stewards, combining them together, and forming the earth with all of the elements. Okay, they super believe in this lindworm, they worship it real hard, and they want everyone else to do so. They are going across the continent, and they are making that happen. In the last time we talked about Belmire, and Belmire is like the beginning section of the Divine Kingdom. It's where it all started. It's where like the magical aether crystal mine is, and aether is like magic, and dense magic crystallizes basically, and everyone there is like a mage because of being so close to all that crystal or whatever. So that's where that began. It has spread westward, and it's spread northward, and it's spread southward, and we're gonna go far to the west where the Divine Kingdom hasn't fully taken control. On the map it says this is the Divine Kingdom, but a lot of the people within these areas would not agree with that, not in the slightest. And we are talking about, specifically today, the Barony of Blackward. And I said I would talk about this, and I went back and forth about whether or not I would, and I decided, you know what, I will fulfill my promise, and I will go in order through this thing. It is a colonization thing. It is a colonization project of Lord Blackward of the Divine Kingdom. The people of Blackward are predominantly common elves. And for a refresher, a common elf is basically not a mage, but not a super furry. They just got a few little animal features, maybe some ears, a tail, cute little eyes or something, but they do not have magic, and they're not like a full-blown furry. Some of them have magic. Again, everything is blurry. There are exceptions to every rule. Yeah, so common elves make up the majority of Blackward. Many in this region still have religious beliefs that are not compatible with the Lindworm orthodoxy. So we'll find going through this that there are some religions that are slowly being just kind of folded in, and then there's others that are being gotten rid of. They just do not compute. They cannot work and live in harmony with the orthodoxy, says the orthodoxy. Okay? And like much of the Northwest, as I was saying, Blackward is a very recent addition, and it is full of conflict all the time. It is a big, huge heckin' problem. Originally, this area was owned by the Earl of Willrock, and it was part of the Willrock province. However, things went to heck, and it was just too much for like this to be the project of Lord Willrock. He has too much going on. There's this whole thing called the Plague of Lilies. The Plague of Lilies was when a bunch of mages, Sylvan in origin, Sylvan element, so nature mages, they created this curse that slowly killed people with plants. It was supposed to only affect divine elves and divine fauns, the divine element, right? Because everyone is influenced by one element. It was meant to do that, and it ended up affecting every single person that wasn't Sylvan. Big bad, and it spread crazy far, and it took a long time to come up with like a solution to this. When this was happening, Blackward, the area that would be Blackward in the future, it was really heckin' devastated by this. Willrock, all of his region, was devastated by this, and it was just too much. So the king, the Divine King, he gave the land to a noble-blooded Sylvan elf named Lord Blackward. So Lord Blackward is Sylvan. while most lords and most nobility are going to be divine, it is very rare for like a Sylvan lord to exist. But Blackbird does, and he's got fox nature energy vibes, as opposed to stinky deer boy vibes. Foxes are the Sylvan and deer are divine. And so the name Blackbird itself comes from the devastation of the plague on the region. So the region got kind of dubbed Blackbird, and then the Lord became Lord of Blackbird. So that is why he is called Lord Blackbird. So I feel like I said Blackbird too much, but so it is the most devastated by the plague of all the places that got devastated by the plague, and that is due to a few factors. The population is super hearth being another element that was not Sylvan, so it was a bunch of like hearth elves. They were very close to where the spell first began, and also Blackbird is super lush and it has a beautiful climate that is perfect for like plants to grow and spread. So that led to a very rapid plague time. The remains of Blackbird like have been hard to repopulate, and it's kind of a big challenge because the lilies have like just established themselves everywhere. The thing about the lilies is they're not dangerous anymore. Like the curse has been clamped down on and like dealt with. If you are properly prepared, you can go there and live there. However, these plants like murdered so many people that no one really wants to live near them, and it's hard to convince them to do so. They don't want to be near the murder plants, even though the murder plants are kept in control. Like, it's just bad vibes, okay? Like, no thank you. Right now, what is going on is everyone's sort of recovering from this huge plague. The plan is kind of to use the weakened state of the populace to the advantage of the Divine Kingdom and work on like displacing people and or converting them. And because like everyone's been so devastated by like the death or they've been left disabled, a lot of people are turning towards the Divine Kingdom and accepting the Lindworm as their god, just so that they can stay alive and live life and stuff, you know? And so like when the cure for the plague happened, the Divine Kingdom went in to Blackbird and they went into rural areas. They would find people that needed help and they would cure their curses. However, when it was advantageous for them to do so, they were like, okay, this curse is too bad, and you will be euthanized basically for your comfort. But that's not really what happened, because the Lindworm Kingdom, Divine Kingdom, they're stinky. They would just see people that were kind of inconvenient, and they'd decide that it wasn't worth helping them. Yeah, so that's Blackbird. That's kind of the basics of it. As I was saying, there's like a lot of religious stuff that goes on, and we're going to get into that. So there's a bunch of them, but we're going to focus purely on the Northwest Hearth Witches, because they're where most of the conflict is occurring in Blackbird. If we talk about everything, it gets way too long, and in theory, we can do a little roundup at some point of all the religions we didn't talk about. So, yay. Fun. Let's go. Northwest Hearth Witches. I'm so great at naming all of these religions. They're very just regional. I just have the name of the region they're in and their vibe. Gets really confusing because of this, unfortunately. And if you don't have my little Wikipedia-esque document of all of my world building, it's hard to keep up with, I understand. So, Northwest Hearth Witches are not the most dominant of religions in this area. However, they are one of two religions that are having a bad time of things. There are like 6 different major religions that occur within Blackbird, because it's very much like a meeting point of like 3 major like areas. Like it's on the border of the Sylvan Forest, which is like a big territory state thing that is Sylvan. It's full of like fawns and stuff. It also borders Willrock, which is full of like forest peoples, the druids. It borders the Divine Kingdom in a way where it's like connected to a lot of hearth traditions that are slowly being folded into the Divine Kingdom, rather than like the pure undiluted might that is the Divine Kingdom, if that makes sense. I hope it does, even a little bit. If not, it's not that important. I think it's not that important. So, Northwest Hearth Witches do not make up the largest population, but they're pretty big, and they have their own little beliefs. They don't really believe in this whole story about the 12 elements coming together being consumed by the Lindworm. So what you'll find in all of these religions is they take like some base components that come from like little scraps of truth. There is a true mythology that exists, and basically no one has the entire story correct, I guess, is the way that I would put it. There's going to be like a lot of like repeating themes as we go through all of these many different religions, but I don't know where I'm going with this. That's just that. There's just going to be a lot of repeating themes, but they're all kind of unique in how they interpret things. So, Northwest Witches, what do they believe? So they believe that the world was created by a bear god, and that bear god's name is Ash, or Hasha. It's two different names for him because there's like two major kind of like language groups who practice this, who are witches. Hasha comes from like the druid languages, whereas Ash is the common language. Basically anything that sounds like English is the common language, and I don't say that because the language is actually English. In my mind, everything from common language is being translated to English. Does that make sense? Everything that's not comes from like the different languages. And like if you were actually to hear all of the elves and stuff talking the common language, it would sound a lot more like the other languages in the area. It would take more influence from that rather than from English. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I feel like I keep saying, does that make sense? You know, that's life, I guess. So right, they believe in the bear god, Hasha or Ash. They believe in his wife, Hazel. Hazel is the cow goddess. And Hazel birthed a pair of twins, and they were named Laja and Shume. And they were referred to as the Gen. Hasha, cow goddess, gave birth to like some snakes. And the Gen are like serpents, as I was saying, they're little snakes. And they split the world to make the rivers and the sea. And so Laja is the larger of the twins. And he split open the sea to divide the world and to separate the elements. Meanwhile, Shume, his sibling, was way more small. Shume created the rivers, and she created the rivers because she wanted to meet all of the animals of the earth. And she just wanted to explore, and that's how she created the rivers. Meanwhile, like I said, Laja made the sea to divide the elements, and his parents, his mom especially, did not like what he did. Laja, the frickin' dork, got banished to the sky. Shume is like, what happened to my brother? Where'd he go? So Shume left the rivers, and she looked and searched the ocean, and she continues to do so. And whenever like the ocean and the sky kind of look like each other, that's when like Shume and Laja are like super close to finally finding each other. But they never are fully able to. Sucks to suck. I don't know why I'm being mean to the snakes. It's kind of because they're stupid. We'll get into it, but the snakes are kind of silly. Because they exist in the sky, interactions with the Gen are believed kind of to cause magic. They're why magic exists in the world. They're just super powerful beings and silly guys. One can kind of look to the stars and like the sky and to the ocean to kind of learn things. Also, it's one of the ways you can predict whether or not your child will be a mage, is through looking at the ocean and sky and what it's doing. Here's some confusing nuance for you. This is going to be very confusing, but it's fun, especially for you gays. You gays love this, even though it is the most heteronormative stuff, okay? The witches of the Northwest believe in a spiritual gender, so one that is not associated with the sex. However, they also believe in a sex-based gender, and they have like a social gender associated with the sexes, but they also have a social gender that is associated with one's soul gender, and one's soul gender does not align always with one's sex gender. So instead of there being like the two genders, there's the four genders. And they would just be as bad, guys. It's worse. It's like you are born one of these four gender combos, and that's that. Okay. And you're not supposed to get with someone who shares either of your genders. Okay. Let me explain this a little better. So, one's spiritual gender is based on what type of elf you are. So what type of element you have. It is basically, if you are a hooved elf, you are considered a daughter of Hazel. And if you are an elf with paws, you are a son of Ash. Again, if you are a daughter of Hazel, you can be like male or female, but you are still a daughter. And same goes with like sons of Ash. Sons of Ash can be male or female. Whether or not you're a son or a daughter is part of your spiritual gender. Does that make sense? So foxes are sons, horses are daughters, and that is that. And so in knowing your soul gender, you have to get with someone who has an opposite soul gender of you and an opposite sex gender. Like you gotta have both. You can't be a daughter and get with another daughter, and you can't be a son and get with a son. Daughters and sons have to pair up, male and female have to pair up, and that's just the long and the short of it. Like I told you, it's hetero, guys. I'm sorry. Who am I talking to when I say this? I had this conversation on stream before, and there is something so sparkle-eyed about like having a spiritual gender, but like they ruin it, guys. So while Ash is considered to be an important figure, ritual practice instead revolves around the worship of Hazel. There are like a few reasons for this. Like one of like the main reasons is that there's like an influence kind of from Druid culture where like motherhood is seen as like very important, and sort of like Druids tend to be like very matriarchal, so there's like influences from that. And another influence is kind of like, you'll see this in a lot of like the different religions, but Ash tends to be very concerned with like the actual earth, whereas Hazel is concerned with like humanity, elfmanity. I'm gonna make that joke a million times. I hope you're prepared. But like, yeah, she's concerned with hearth, which is like the element of family. And meanwhile, Hasha is concerned with nature, like trees and animals and plants. I guess trees are plants, but you know, I hope that makes sense. Worship tends to revolve more around Hazel because she will like listen and she's relevant to what's going on, and that's why it tends to be considered a hearth witch situation. As I was saying, mages, they're related to the Gen. That's where they receive their power, according to Northwest Hearth witchcraft. Yeah. According to that, like that's where like magic comes from. It comes from the Gen, and it was believed that the Gen gave magic to the mages kind of willy-nilly because the Gen are kind of lazy babies, and they were like, here, you just take a bunch of power, and if you ever have trouble, sort it out yourself. Meanwhile, Hasha and Hazel are like more measured. They listen, and they're wise, and they will lend their power when needed, and they're discerning with it. The Gen, not so much. It is believed prayers to the Gen rarely reach them, and even when they do, the Gen are kind of not wise and they make bad choices, so it's best not to worship them. Just let the Gen swim about and be snakes. Yeah, so that's like the basic belief system behind everything. Practices. Let's talk about in practice how like all of this plays out. Okay, so mages hold a very important place in family structures. It's kind of like the third, not gender, but it's like the third continuum, the third social aspect that is important in like this worship. So in a family structure, whether or not you're a mage will determine what you do and what you are expected to do as a part of society. So mage daughters, and daughter refers to whether they are hearth mages. Hearth mages, the daughters, are expected to upkeep the family hearth and its enchantments. They're also expected to learn how to divine knowledge, do all of that stuff. If you want to know more about hearth magic, you can look at my other video in the playlist. It's one of the very early ones where I super go through the magic system. But yeah, so the daughters are expected to do that, while mage sons, so sylvan mages, they're expected to use earth magic to tend to crops, raise livestock, to help them with gathering, hunting, whatever is required in that regard. Because, as I was saying at the very beginning, there's overlap, right? So while this is a religion, there's also just varying cultures that will practice this religion. So not everyone is going to be like agrarian. There's also some more like nomadic witches that exist. They're just different ways of life. They're still witches. They're still under this umbrella. Magic that revolves around child rearing and birth, that is not done by mages. They specifically use witchcraft in that because Hazel is the ultimate mother, unlike the Gen, who are not. They're little babies. They don't know anything about raising babies. Babies can't raise babies, guys. So you do not look to mages for help with that. That is what the family witches do. And the witches set up different like rituals and rites, and the mages just kind of like act as participants and help where they're allowed to. And like witches are important, right? However, a balance is needed within Northwest Hearth, because there is like such a specific social order that needs to exist. There are things that are done to make sure that there is like a needed amount of mages and non-mages being born. So they try to like influence what children will become based on what is needed within society. Okay, so if not enough mages are born, what will be done is that expectant mothers will like bathe in the river and in the ocean, otherwise have like water poured on their abdomen because it is like associated with the Gen, right? They also, if they're not a mage themselves, they will not nurse their child themselves. They'll have a mage mother do that. There's no mage mother to do that. Like there's witchcraft that can be done to help that whole dealio. And then they're also given like enchanted toys and stuff. And meanwhile, like the opposite is done if there are too many mages and we need some wishes in this generation. And so like they'll be nursed by like a non-mage, and the baby will be cute. Where am I going with this? They won't bathe in all the water, and they'll use well water instead, because river water, again, Shume is going to be in there, and in rainwater, Laja is going to be there. So do not want the Gen, well water it is. And then like witches will make like special blankets and toys that have like alchemic principles that will disperse aether and make it go away. With all that, they are usually able to influence how a child ends up growing up. Like I think in a technical sense, like the the main thing is probably all of like the aether toys and stuff. However, like it might be the case that like the river and ocean actually does have like aether present, but I think it's more the toys actually. In any case, when a baby is born and they're like super one direction or the other, like because they're common elves, it tends to be more in the middle. But if they have like a baby that has like no animal features whatsoever, they're not going to bother trying to make them into not a mage. The same thing goes for if they're born like super fawn-like in appearance, like they have like just very prevalent animal features. They're going to be like, this child was born to be a witch. And because they're so one way or the other, they want to like instead, they want them to blossom into like their full potential as a witch or a mage. Like it's just kind of determined that that's what the gods decided. It's best to go with that. And yeah, that's kind of the basics of what they do. I guess we go back to Blackwood then. We can start talking kind of about the conflict that is going on with the Lindworm Orthodoxy and the witches. Like I was saying, the witches don't really feel like they're part of the Orthodoxy. They don't really want to be part of the Orthodoxy. They would very much like to be left alone, but they're not. They believe that the Orthodoxy is actually like an expression of Laja and his anger at being like locked away. And some believe that Laja has like actually found a way to come back to Earth, and he is doing so by hiding as the queen of the Divine Kingdom, because the queen of the Divine Kingdom is actually a snake monster. She got turned into one for reasons. And when like the Plague of Lilies broke out and hit Blackwood Province, it affected mostly the Daughters of Hazel, right? Because it wasn't supposed to affect Sylvan. It wouldn't affect anyone who is Sylvan. So like all of the Sons of Ash, by their very nature, are all Sylvan elves. And so only the Daughters of Hazel were affected. And that was believed to be that Laja was just very angry at his mother and taking it out on the daughters. Others feel like maybe same idea, but maybe the reason that all of the Daughters of Hazel have been weakened is because Laja actually has injured his mother. That has caused all of the Daughters of Hazel to fall ill and die and stuff. Regardless of what is going on, they believe that if they submit to Laja's will, it's okay, because gods are so above everyone, and they believe that if they are forced to submit to Laja's will, to like the Divine Kingdom's will, Hazel is not going to blame them, and she will come to them with salvation regardless, because she's gonna punish her bad boy snake son, because he's a bad boy and he needs to go to his room. Yeah, so that's their opinion on it. They're not the only religion practiced. Like I was saying, there is Northern Sylvan that's practiced, there's Northern Hazalian, there's Heiths, and there's Folk Sylvan, and there's also the Arcane Heresy, which is interesting, but we're not going to get into it because these can go on forever. So like the Divine Kingdom is only okay with Hazalian and Heis because those can easily be folded into their religions, but the other ones, there is a lot of tension. And like the Arcane Heresy that exists, they're living on like the border between the Divine Kingdom and the Sylvan Woods, the Sylvan Woods being like a different state entirely, so they have been able to flee, a lot of them. Meanwhile, the northwestern like Hearth Witches are like in the middle of all of it and kind of stuck. So when the plague hit, basically half the population was wiped out, and it was all the Daughters of Hazel, which has really affected them, understandably. What is left are mostly like Sylvan mages and Sylvan witches, and Blackwood considers them to be responsible for the plague. Even though they're not, they're still treated as if they are druids, especially those that don't speak like the common language and speak the druid language instead. Like they are just considered druids, and a lot of them were killed because of this, and they're treated badly. Of the witches that survive now, most of them just kind of like hide their beliefs and try to fit into like the new society that exists around them. Things are not looking good for the Hearth Witches, unfortunately. And those that do try to hold on to things and they speak out against the Lindworm, they have a bad time of it. Future Bones, realizing what comes next, messed up, trigger warning for messed up marriages and awful BS from evil people. Okay. Lindworm Kingdom, not cool, as we know, but they're really not cool. I've been lying to you guys and saying like they're the best and they're great. They're not. They're mean. They're stupid. They're bad. So when one speaks out against them, they are forced to say a prayer of devotion, and then after doing so, their tongues are cut out, and if they die because of that, it is because they did not truly accept the Lindworm, and if they survive, then they did accept the Lindworm, and it's okay for them to stick around. Yeah. Meanwhile, those that refuse are buried alive, face down, because the Lindworm exists under the earth, right? And they're forced to like look upon him and maybe speak words to him before they die. Either way, it is also kind of symbolic of the Lindworm devouring them as part of the earth. And it's not great, guys. I don't know. I think that's kind of stinky. Yeah, before we wrap it up, I think I'll go into a little bit about Willrock and what they do with the Northwestern Witches, because like we're gonna forget about it once we get to Willrock. So let's just go into detail while we're talking about them. So they, again, hit hard by the Plague of Lilies, right? So a lot of them do also exist within Willrock. So Blackward, Willrock were split up. So there is a population in both areas. Like I said, like the Hearth Witches, like their customs revolve strongly around like these 4 social roles. And after the Plague of Lilies happened, like half of them were wiped out. It's kind of like if all men were wiped out or all women were wiped out. Super devastating, right? And because of how like families were set up, right, where like one was Hearth and one was Sylvan, the Hearth one is gone. So all families that exist are basically like single parent families. So they live near the Druids, so a lot of them speak the Druid language, but a lot of them also speak Common, and being bilingual is pretty common, though they're bilingual with like their own sorts of dialects. So what ended up happening with all of like these single families was that like all of the men were kind of separated from their families to go like work. This was especially due to the fact that like so many people died and that the Divine Kingdom needs people to work. So like men were separated. Meanwhile, like the women and girls were forced into like marriages or betrothed otherwise. And most of the children ended up like staying with their mothers or like their grandmothers or their aunts, just kind of like female family members. Yeah, so when like first seized, more terrible things, the fawns and mages were like divided, and then all were kind of expected to swear themselves to the Lindworm, and like though they have like that tongue cutting out thing, that was just hugely impractical, not a great thing to do when you're like missing half the population, so they didn't do that. However, mages were tattooed with like alchemic symbols so that they couldn't do magic anymore. Again, because it's only Sylvan ones left, and it was the Sylvan mages that created the plague in the first place, hence why all of these non-believer mages had their magic removed via like tattoos. It's like Sovereign but in reverse. You know Sovereign, you know. Anyways, and they have like a tattoo of like the Lindworm around their neck. The Lindworm's mouth opens to their heart. Cool tattoo, bad origin. And because the Lindworm Kingdom is really weird about fawns, a lot of like the remarried women, the forced to marry women, like had their like fur shaved off and their tails docked based on like the preference of their new husband. So bad. I told you they're not good. I lied to you guys in the last episode, and I'm so sorry for this. Yeah, like the Lindworm Kingdom, super patriarchal compared to these like more matriarchal religions. It gets a little silly, the matriarchy with other cultures. We'll get into it, but like yeah, super patriarchal. It's kind of whatever the husband wanted, and like if the husband suspects that his wife is not respecting the Lindworm, it's within his right to punish her, and those are usually punishments like to the mouth, because that's kind of like just the thing that we're gonna come back to over and over again. Commonly, he will like lash her until she speaks like praise to the Lindworm, or like if he believes her to be insincere, he can put like a hot coal in her mouth or a hot metal or pour like hot liquid in there. You can do whatever. Meanwhile, because you know what? Actually, they are nice. They're really nice, okay? Repeatedly torturing your wife, that is bad, and you can be punished for that. You have to be reasonable in how often you torture your wife, okay? Be good. Because if your wife is so frequently disrespecting the Lindworm, she should instead be sent to the officials, you know, like those in charge, and they can remove her tongue. Duh, obviously. That is what happens. Of the forced marriages that exist, obviously the most violent ones tend to be like where the wife doesn't even speak the language, like does not speak the common language, and if she is a fawn. So like that very much increases violence, and it's bad, and we do not stand. The marriages that have like the least amount of trouble tend to be like ones that are like with locals, because like not all people are sadistic freaks. Shocking, I know. A lot of people don't do that shit, and the ones who especially don't do that are like local widowed men in particular, those that like had wives before this and lost them to the plague and just really need help to support their families and like have a partner in that. So those tend to like work out pretty well. They both get something pretty good out of it, because they're both kind of widowed and in a really tight spot, and in rural areas, you know, that is hard. And also like in those marriages, like it tends to be that the wife can still kind of like in secret practice her religion and stuff. Like it's all in the down low. We're cool. It works out good. This tends to be rural, because in the city, I don't think you're getting away with it. Yeah. As I was saying, Lindworm stinky, terrible, many war crimes. Anyways, so hopefully stinky wizards get their due. I hope this was interesting. Yeah, we'll get into it again later. And basically, every single time we're going to learn about some horrible shit that the Lindworm Kingdom does. They're very inquisition-y. Not good. We do not stand. Thank you for listening. Leave a like if you liked. If you hated it, don't tell me. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. If not, a little heart can go a very long way for me. And yeah, I'll come back on Friday with a video on how to do your writing. I think I did a good job with the video that comes up. See you next Monday. We'll talk about Last Sia. Yeah. Okay, goodbye.